I've been back since 2002. I'm also a long-standing member of Men's Fellowship, and proudly am one of the founding members of the council here in Whittier of the Knights of Columbus. So my testimony. Sorry, I'm not going to impress you with the fact that I was lost and I had gone down the path of the wayward son, or didn't have faith, had lost my faith, and left the Catholic Church. I'm sorry, I'm not going to testify to that. The reality was that I really had the benefit of two parents that were very, very grounded in faith. They set a phenomenal example of how to live by faith. Now, my mother was a scholar, but she was not a biblical scholar. But she exhibited flat out the prototype of how to live one's life by faith. And my father was smart enough to say the most brilliant person he ever knew, the best teacher he ever had, was my mom. And my father said, I may talk a good game. And he talked about faith a lot. And he had, Father Dave probably remembers the eulogy of my father. My father had an inherent faith in God, specifically God the Father. So my dad evangelized, preached it. Faith conversations were a constant in my life. So no, my testimony isn't about that. I had a charmed life. I had a charmed childhood going into young adulthood. But then adulthood happened, and challenges that test one's faith did happen. And as human beings, I'm sorry, and as men, we try to do it on our own. And that's how we fail. And I will tell you, my father talked about when he failed for one of two reasons. Number one is he didn't listen to my mother. And number two, he tried to do it without God. So, trials, tribulations of adulthood. The first trial that I had as an adult, I looked up and said, God, why me? Why is this happening to me? I don't understand. Then I realized that those trials, those tribulations, those challenges come to prepare you for the additional challenges you're going to go throughout the rest of your life. And they're going to come. Faith or no faith, they're coming. So I went through my first challenge, worked to keep my faith. But yeah, I did it alone. I did it alone. The next challenge came. And it devastated my family. The loss of the rock, the illness of the mom, my father losing his life partner. But because I had gone through challenge, trial, tribulation earlier as a younger adult, when everybody else fell apart, when my older sister and my much older brother couldn't handle things, my father turned to me to take over and handled it. And my mother died with grace. But again, I still was alone. Additional challenges happened. Fast forward to just over 16 years ago. My nephew Paul Perunjian, some of you know him, his father-in-law is here. His father-in-law is here. My nephew Paul Perunjian invited me to a meeting at Men's Fellowship here at St. Bruno's. Paul and Gabe Saavedra, he was only Gabe Saavedra back then, not Deacon Gabe, were the two founding members of Men's Fellowship here at St. Bruno. I went to that first meeting, and I've never left. Now, my life in those last 16 years, oh yes, I've had hell. I've had hell to pay. Relationships, marital strife, death of family members, loss of jobs. And when you're a six-figure plus earner and you work for the wrong company that just got acquired, guess what? You're losing your job. Gone through it a multitude of times. A multitude of times. I didn't turn away from my faith. I didn't look up and say, God, why me? No, I actually turned harder into my faith. But the reality was, during those trials, tribulations, during that period of time, I had the Men of Men's Fellowship. Whether they knew exactly what I was going through or not, because I didn't always share the exact specifics. Some of them inherently knew. They prayed for me. They prayed with me. I listened to their stories, and they served as example of men that turned toward their faith and strived to live a life of excellence as Catholic men facing challenges in the world. Oh, by the way, I wasn't the only one going through hell. Realize that. And I also recognize that attending every meeting wasn't necessarily for me. Maybe I could help somebody else. And in helping somebody else, as my father would say, mijo, you know when I evangelize, I'm evangelizing for myself as much as I am to you. So it gave me an opportunity in our fellowship meetings to share, and in trying to strengthen somebody else's faith and give them perspective, it in fact reminds me how to keep perspective and stay in my faith. Now, when I started at Men's Fellowship, I was kind of on the end of the youngers. Well, I look around, now I'm kind of on the senior end of things. That's putting it mildly. That's good. And hopefully, I can be somebody that can guide and mentor, encourage the other men that are brave enough and smart enough to come into our Men's Fellowship. I know it's happening. I know it's working. Those that know me, yes, I'm pretty logical. I'm also a smartass. And when we've attended meetings of the larger California Men's Fellowship, we usually have a pretty good contingent from St. Bruno's that attends. There have been times that our table is long. The smartasses sit near me. And then the nice people sit on the other end. So there was a meeting where this lonely-looking, timid-looking guy walked by. Said, hey, do you need a place to sit? Yes, he was there by himself. He sat with the smartasses. And yes, we entertained him. And he sat with us the rest of the day. Now again, we're in Whittier. That guy lived in Cerritos. He joined our fellowship and was an active member of our fellowship. And I know we were there for him. He faced a massive trial in his very serious cancer diagnosis, where he had to have multiple surgeries, literally didn't know whether he was going to have a tongue and ever be able to speak again. Well, the Men of Men's Fellowship helped him, guided him, reached out to him, prayed over him, texted him, called him, voicemailed him. And he was grateful, continues to be grateful. Now, he's moved. He's moved to Arizona. I still communicate with him. And he still tells me, Sergio, thank you. Thank you for constantly reaching out. Thank you for being there for me. And also, he was inspired by what we do and established his own men's fellowship at his work. So, my story's not over. After all the trials and tribulations, somebody who's very active in fitness and has always been fit. December of 23, when I've got the best job in the world, job I still have, doing extremely well. My training is in phenomenal shape, and I'm leaning out. I ended up in the hospital. And those of you that remember John Ritter, or most recently Lindsey Graham, what he was diagnosed with, I had an aortic dissection. And after 12 plus hours in the ER and all kinds of tests, I was approached and said, well, you don't look like somebody we're about to tell this information to. Because we can tell you train. I said, you had an aortic dissection. Good news is you're still alive. That started a period of the next 7 months where I spent 31 nights in the hospital, facing 3 life-threatening situations. Initially, all separate, but ultimately realized they were all related. Throughout the process, work was great. My body went to heck. But the men of Men's Fellowship kept me sane. They checked in. I got calls, I got texts, I got emails. Because I physically wasn't able to be there. And over the next 18 months, I was in constant pain. Didn't know from one day to the next, even though I could still go to the gym, I didn't know if I could stand long enough to get through a mass. Walking from the parking lot into church or to a fellowship meeting would take me 45 minutes to an hour. So I didn't have to. But I still had the men from Men's Fellowship reaching out, helping me stay sane. Well, obviously, I recovered. And rebuilding that body that I once had almost 3 years ago. But the constant has been Men's Fellowship. A few months back, maybe almost a year, some of the men of Men's Fellowship, the leadership team, we had a meeting about what our next direction is, what we can do to improve, what we can do to recruit. A lot of our men are very motivated, and they serve on multiple ministries. They were talking about, we need to serve more. And Dave Zolfrey, our leader, who actually finally agreed to be called our leader, spoke up and said, there's liability issues with doing some of the things you want to do. We need to consider that. And I spoke up and said, gentlemen, you don't understand the purpose of men's ministry. Catholic Men's Fellowship. It's the men. We're not supposed to go out to save the world. We're supposed to save the men and give them the strength and the hope and help them increase their faith so they can handle the challenges in the world that they face as Catholic men. So God works in mysterious ways. And shortly thereafter, somebody started coming around trying to recruit for Knights of Columbus. And then one of them happened to go to one of our events and offered to drive some of us. I drove with him. This guy Bruce was a pretty nice guy. He talked about Knights as much as I talked about fellowship. Then they finally came around again, told us what it would take. That they had a vision to start a council of Knights of Columbus here at St. Bruno. I think I was the first non-Knight member that signed up. And my attitude was to the other members of fellowship is, if you're a member of Men's Fellowship, why aren't you a Knight? But then to the Knights, if you're a Knight, why aren't you in Men's Fellowship? And obviously, we've done a pretty good job of merging our efforts, working together, working the synergies, because the reality is, where they're strong, we may be weak, but where they're weak, we're strong. So I'm grateful. But it wouldn't have happened without Men's Fellowship, and without my nephew Paul, and without Gabe Saavedra. I never would have attended that first meeting 16 plus years ago. And I am eternally grateful for everything that Men's Fellowship has done for me. And I hope and pray that I can give back to fellowship and maybe impact somebody the way I've been impacted. So gentlemen, if you're not a member of Men's Fellowship at this point in time, not recruiting you to St. Bruno, but you're welcome. Find one. Prayer does change lives. And knowing you have other men that listen and are praying with you It's huge. It's huge. And the Knights are pretty cool too. Thank you, gentlemen.